Hello, welcome back to the Board Games 4K YouTube channel, and this is a channel where we look at various tabletop games, card games, board games, role-playing games, all that sort of stuff, and we give you playthroughs, reviews and other stuff, and we generally talk crap about board games and tabletop games in glorious 4K resolution. And in this video we'll be talking about a bit of an ancient, some people say war game, some people say it's not a war game, and we'll be talking about Memoir 44, released in I think it's 2002, 2003, maybe 2004, who knows, can't remember. We'll be giving you a very brief overview of the rules because this one can turn into a bit of a sprawling beast, and we'll be telling you what we do like, what we don't like, and then we'll come back and we'll tell you whether or not Memoir 44 is still worth playing in 2019 and beyond. And if you're new here, please consider subscribing to our channel. Assist us in helping this channel grow so we can bring you more stuff, and leave a comment in the relevant section down below, and we'll see you after this. Board Games 4K. So Memoir 44, this is a very light entry level war game, and we think it's a war game. Some people claim it's not a war game, but we don't care. We don't care what you think. This is a war game, right? So what you're going to be doing with this one, you're going to be taking one of two armies. It's essentially a two-player game out of the box, and in the core box you've got the Germans and the Americans, and you'll be picking a scenario, setting up the board with various bits of terrain, putting your armies on designated spots, putting different bits of equipment, different sandbags or barbed wire and stuff on the board, and then depending on the rules of the scenario, somebody will go first. And what you'll be doing, you'll be drawing a specific amount of cards and putting them on your little card tray. The board itself is dissected into three parts. You've got the central part, you've got the left flank, and then you've got the right flank. Yeah, so each card will have an instruction on it. It will tell you where to activate your troops, what flank or what portion of the board to activate them, and then it will tell you what type of troops that you want to activate. And you've got infantry, which are little ground troops. You've got your artillery, which is the little things that fire ballistic rockets and stuff, and then you've got your tanks and all that sort of stuff. And the cards will generally tell you to move one of them and then attack, right? Or there might be some other cards that give you special instructions like air raids and various different things, but generally speaking the card will tell you to move and then attack. And what you'll do, each unit has got a specific number of movement points, and you'll move them, and depending on the terrain you may have to stop, you may not be able to go through them, and once you've moved then you'll attack. And again, each unit will have its own special attack criteria, and you always have to have line of sight between yourself and the target, and depending on the terrain and various other factors, line of sight may not be possible, or it may reduce the amount of attack dice that you roll. But generally speaking, each type of unit has a different type of attack die that you want to roll. You pick up that many dice, you roll them, and then depending on what you roll, that's how many units that get destroyed on the other side. You've got infantry. If you roll infantry symbol, that will destroy that number of infantry. If you roll a number of tanks, you'll get a number of tanks. You've got the little green stars which are scenario specific, and they may do different things depending on the scenario. And then you may have depending, if you roll the retreat symbol, then that unit will have to retreat, and then when they retreat back, the opponent decides where they have to retreat. What will happen is the scenario will tell you when you complete specific scenario based objectives, you'll be taking medals and you'll be putting them on the medal track on your board. And again, so part of the scenario dependent rules will tell you how many medals you need to get, and the first player to reach that number of medals will be the winner of Memoir 44. And with this game there's an absolute plethora of expansions. You've got the Mediterranean expansion, you've got the Pacific Theatre expansion, you've got the Eastern Front expansion, you've got the Winter Wars expansion, you've got the Overlord expansion that allows you to simulate multiplayer battles up to 8 players. So one person will take the commander, and then the other players will take one flank and the centre, or you can play with 6 where the commander will take the centre, and you'll play out on these huge massive maps, pre-printed maps, and with pre-printed terrain, and you'll battle it out on that way. So you've got the breakthrough maps, which are these sort of extended versions of the standard maps, and there's so many different expansions and different ways to play this. So it's all sort of modular. You can chuck in what you want, take out what you want, and it's all scenario dependent. So once you've completed the specific demands of the scenario, you are the winner of Memoir 44. So what do we like about Memoir 44? So the first thing that we got to talk about with this one is that it's a very light war game, and again, we don't care what you think, whether or not you think this is a war game, because in our opinion it's definitely a war game, and it may not be that it matches the heights of your GMT magnum opus, but for me it allows me to play it with my kids, and it allows me not to get bogged down in these rules, and it's very, very quick game, and that's why I like it, because it suits kids and adults, and it brings your kids together without this immense behemoth of a strategy game forcing you to learn all these different rules. You know, everything's on cards, all the different rules are on cards, and it's very, at the core box, it's very easy to digest, even for kids. So the second thing about Memoir 44 is the amount of options available to you, even at the core box, is absolutely astonishing. I mean, I think there's 10 scenarios in the base game, and there's loads more online. I mean, there's so many scenarios available. You've got the 2 campaign books that you can pick up, which let you go through the specific historical, chronological events, and then you've got, like we said, you've got all the Pacific Theatre that takes you into the Japanese front and that, and then you've got the Russian, Soviet scenarios that you can get, and you've even got like the scenario builder from Days of Wonder Online, which allows you to make up your own scenarios and then print the maps off yourself. So there's the fact that there's so many expansions for this one, it's astonishing, and the fact it's still being supported is absolutely amazing. So the third thing that we got to talk about with this one is it's got the perfect blend of luck and strategy, and the fact that you've got dice rolls and random card draw means it's very, very random, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen, but that simulates the fog and chaos of war, doesn't it? So you've got your orders coming through via the card deck, between your boots on the ground and where you are on the battlefield, and you've got your commanders making decisions, you know, via remote control. Then something gets lost between there and here, right? So that card draw, that randomness, simulates the fog of war from your commanders, and also the chaos of battle when you get down to a micro level. There's a really good blend of skill and luck. So the fact that this game is effectively scenario based means that these scenarios should have been tested, which will more often than not ensure that there's a good balance between the two sides, because it could have been the case that they just, you know, give you the pieces and then, you know, you make up your own battles, you just have one battle. But the fact that this game differs from other sort of similar games like L'Attaque, or what's it called now, Stratega or whatever, or any of those sort of very simple war games, means that you're going to get a good balance of gameplay between the two opposing forces. So the final thing that we like, well, there's loads of other things we ain't got time to talk about, right? Because otherwise this review would go on forever, and you don't want that, do you? The last thing we're going to talk about is the fan-made content made possible firstly by the Days of Wonder Online, and then you've also got the option to build, if you're so inclined, if you're that much of a geek, you can build your own custom terrain, and we've done a little bit of that, you know, sawn up a few bits of MDF and stuck some flocking on there to make the hills and all that. And some of the stuff that we've seen, some of the pictures we've seen online of some people that they've made some amazing bits and pieces for this, and it's almost like, you know, that sort of HeroScape sort of thing where people take the core ideas of something, and it allows you, because it's like a sort of a sandbox kind of thing, it's not in the game, but it just presents you with a set of tools, and you can go mad with it as much as you want. So that's another thing to be applauded about Memoir 44, the fact that it hasn't changed over time, it hasn't got a second edition, and it stayed true to its roots right from the very beginning, and what's it been out now for, like 15 years or something, and people are still supporting it, still playing it. That is probably the major thing for me, is that 15 years after it's released, it's still being supported today. So what don't we like about Memoir 44? So the first thing that is a pain in the bum about this game is that it can get quite fiddly, both physically, because the bits are quite small when you're trying to get your little men on the hexes, and sometimes when you've got like, you're trying to get 4 tanks on a hex, they just don't fit on there properly. You know, it can get quite fiddly physically on the board. That's a pain in the bum. And secondly, it could be fiddly with the amount of rules that you've got to remember. I know they all come on cards, right? But there's so many different rules you've got rules for the different armies, and if you were using expansion, say the Japanese, for instance, you've got the kamikaze rules and all that sort of stuff. You've got all these different rules floating about, and the rules are scenario dependent. So the more stuff you add, the more stuff there is to remember. And looking for those little badges, the way the badges sit on the board, you know, for the French resistance and all that, they're a real pain in the bum, because you've got to move them with the army, and then you've got to search through them all. We put them in a like a coin collection book, you know. So we've got them all in here. If you can hear that, that makes it a lot easier. We've got all the badges in as much of an order as we can put them in. So that might be a good idea. If you haven't thought about that, that might be a little brainwave for you. So yeah, there's so much stuff that it does get a bit of a pain to sort it all out and to put it up and tear it down. But yeah, it can get quite fiddly, both physically and mentally. So is it the second thing? I think it's the second thing that we don't like about Memoir 44 is we talked about how the randomness, the card draw and the dice sort of fit that sort of fog and chaos of war. But on the flip side of that, it could mean that you're never going to get a break, right? So you might shuffle the cards up and draw your cards and that, and it may be the case that none of the cards that you really need to make progress in the game come out, and your opponent gets all the cards that they want, you know. And I know it's a case of sort of making best use of the tools that you've got in front of you, but the random nature of this one may mean that you are stuffed before you get out of the gate. So the final thing that we do not like about Memoir 44 is it is looking a little bit dated, right? I mean, look at the box, right? I know you might like the cover, but that to me looks like something out of 2004. And it could do with a bit of a refresh. But I think the fact that you've got so many expansions, and people were clamouring for reprints of Eastern Front last year, weren't they? They were banging down on Days of Wonder's door, going, come on, hurry up and reprint this one. And they did. They reprinted Winter Wars, they reprinted Eastern Front, they sold out immediately. And yeah, I don't think you're ever going to see a proper second edition of this one, because it's been so well supported. So like we said, we applaud the fact that it's been well supported since 2004, but it's also to the game's detriment, because I don't think we're ever going to see a second edition. And if they did print a second edition that wasn't really compatible with the previous versions, I think that probably the fans would go absolutely ballistic. And that's no pun intended, right? So to summarise, Memoir 44, is it still worth playing today and in the future? And quite frankly, this is the definitive entry-level war game. End of, right? There's nothing can compare to this one. This is the top-notch entry-level war game. If you're looking, if you never played these sort of GMT war games or that, and you don't, they look too intimidating, and you want something that scratches that itch but isn't too daunting, then this game is the first port call. And I'll tell you, we bailed off on this one for a while because we thought, nah, it just looks like a stuffy old war game, you know, from the 1950s or something like that. But we took a punt on it, we picked it up cheap, and now we've got everything. Yeah, we've got everything for this. And my kids love it, I love it, and it's even better if you could pick up the Overlord expansion, because that just opens the game up into this massive, epic. The Overlord ranks along games like Twilight Imperium, right, for that sort of epic feel, because it just takes the game onto another level. You've got 6 or 8 here sat around a table, everyone's doing their own thing but trying to work together, right? This game is so customizable to your taste. I mean, you can start off with a core set and just take it easy with a few rules, a few bits of terrain, and then you can chuck in the various expansions, you know. Then you can go for the breakthrough board if you want to take a longer game, and then eventually you can turn it into this massive beast. You know, it's completely customizable to the level of difficulty you want to delve into on this one. So yeah, I mean, Memoir 44 it's an essential game, absolutely essential. If you haven't got it on your shelf, then do yourself a favour and go and pick it up today, because for us it's 9 out of 10. This is a fantastic experience, fantastic game, and absolute essential purchase in 2019, and it will last forever. So like we said, if you're new here, then please consider subscribing to our channel, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.